Don't land. Don't land on anything. This doesn't mean don't fall. Just don't land. Sometimes we feel like we're without a reference point or feel like we're up in the air about something. Don't land. Don't drop into some kind of a position on things. If you need to drop into a position on things, it's better to do that choicelessly, out of your awareness. It takes a lot of practice to do that because the self-centered mind, the ego mind, wants results, or it wants to know, am I right or am I wrong? Or am I right or wrong? Or are they right or are they wrong? Don't land. Those are all landings. You land on this, you land on that, you come to conclusions. Don't conclude anything. It is not necessary to conclude anything. Anytime you conclude anything, you're actually abstracting yourself from the fundamental realism. We all know about realism and abstraction. You're abstracting yourself by going up into concepts about your life rather than living your life. If you actually are living your life, you won't know what's going on most of the time. Ego, the self-centeredness, the me feeling, the person that thinks they can win or lose, is unreal and is not dependable. Temporarily, it's dependable. It's dependable a little bit, but just enough to seduce you into wanting a little bit more dependability and a little bit more, and that's where opinions come from. We've thought about this up and down long enough. I'm just going to come to a conclusion about this, my opinion. What do you think about that? I think we should do this. I think we should do that. As soon as you say that about anything, even if it's accurate 10 seconds ago, now it's no longer accurate because everything is moving all the time. Completely. So don't land. And the practice of not landing takes repetition. How do we do that? We see the way we keep grasping at this, rejecting that. You can notice it just from here to the parking lot, from here to the kitchen, from here to the bathroom, from here to the community room, or wherever you're moving from one place to another, or maybe not moving. Maybe you're just sitting in your car and we're always going to something, grasping at something. And it's not so much when I say don't land, I know you can't really help that. I certainly can't help it. But by saying that, we bring our awareness to that, and we see the way, if we put some tension on that, we can't really intercept that, because the causes and conditions that are showing up that cause us to land here, land there, judge this, condemn that, accept this, value this, devalue that, on and on and on like this, are dependently arisen. You can do a little bit of that, but not much. So by suggesting that or saying that, I'm basically saying, look very closely and carefully at what you actually do and don't do, and just watch that. Watch and see the way we go to a judgment about something. Everything is kind of loaded with some kind of it should be that way. It shouldn't be that. That shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't be feeling this way. That's a great one, isn't it? You're having an emotion. I shouldn't be feeling that. Well, let me help you there. Yeah, you should. How do you know? Because you're feeling it. You're actually feeling that way, and it is dependently arisen. It means this happened, that happened, this pushed on that tipped over. You ever seen? Any of you ever seen a Rube Goldberg? What they call a thing where the ball goes down the little ramp and it hits a bucket, and the bucket tips over and it falls into something else. It's like a highly individualized dominoes. Each domino is a different thing happening against something else. But it's just like dominoes. You push one and they just go. Causes and conditions. So what we want to do as meditators, as people who have an interest in living a life that is less confusing, living a life that is more maybe generous, living a life that is more balanced or more clear about what's happening, we might have to look at a whole lot of imbalance. And that's difficult because when we see imbalance or something is off or incorrect or not right, we want to cover it up with our opinions or ideas or description of it. I've watched myself doing this today, seeing certain things happen, and watch how my reactive mind goes to start to cover that. It's just about watching the mind do that. You don't have to correct it. You don't have to stop doing that, even though I'm saying don't land, but I also know pretty impossible to just never land anywhere and just be an open space, openness all the time. So it's an ongoing practice that we do. Question?
Do you practice?
Do I practice what?
Do you practice?
Do I practice what? I want you to be specific. I'm happy to answer. I don't practice tennis. I'm no good at it. I'm terrible at tennis. It's probably because I don't practice it. Do you mean, do I practice what I'm talking to you about?
Do you practice in the same way that we practice?
Probably similar. Been doing it a while longer, so I may be maybe a little bit more clear about seeing the way I land or don't land. Yes.
The beginning you said don't land, but that doesn't mean don't fall.
Yes.
Could you say what it means to fall and not land?
Actually, to not land is to fall. If you land, you stop falling. So the practice of meditation actually introduces each one of us to a kind of free fall. We eventually get so we don't know what's happening. We don't know what we're doing. We're not sure what's supposed to happen next, or feel confused. That's a kind of free fall. And what I'm suggesting or recommending, insofar as you can, just stay in that. Stay there. You don't have to maintain it, but don't necessarily interrupt it with grasping at something or latching onto something.
What's the difference between vacillating, which can feel like not landing, and just not landing?
Vacillating is no. Sound familiar? It's actually kind of grasping a little bit and then rejecting and then grasping, but it's very quick. So that's the vacillating part. It's a good question. More about that, or more about any kind of style that you might be recognizing yourself. Anything? Yes?
What is falling?
Just no reference point. No reference point, nothing. You don't land, so you don't have a reference point. You don't know who you are. It's happening now. To you.
Can you have no reference point in the context of the forms which function as a reference point?
Yes. Yeah, by not grasping at them. But we're unsure, so we tend to get a reference point, and instead of just a reference point, we just see it in the context of all the other countless numbers of reference points, and we happen to be watching that one or this one or those two, but there's no grasping at it. When we see it start to move away or die out, we don't go and try to resuscitate it. This is what happens with opinions. Opinions are just resuscitated reference points. It's a reference point you had at a particular time, and instead of letting it die out, you go in and charge it back up because it makes you feel confident. Well, I'm the kind of person that thinks this, or I'm the kind of person that we quite often hear ourselves say, or other people say, well, I've always been this way, or this is the way I was taught, or some kind of a explanation of who we are, what we are. Yes, sir.
Is awareness of vacillation falling?
Is awareness a vacillation?
Is awareness of your vacillation falling?
Sure. It is. The vacillation, it's only vacillation as long as there's somebody watching it. When there's no one watching it, then you are the vacillation. There's nothing to see. You're this way and you're that way. I often say ego or self-centeredness is discontinuous. It's not that there isn't an identity, but it lasts about, or maybe you don't know. So I'll tell you, an eighth of a second. It lasts, and then it shows up, and then we're someone else, and enjoy that. As far as we know, we only have this life. Of course, there's those other ones, but we're just here to talk about these. Yes.
I'm just wondering how we can keep from landing with the forms.
As far as like the sutras and being here at a certain time,
Becoming rigid about it. Or
becoming rigid.
aggressive.
Yeah, that's good. Is to you can watch how you observe the forms and how you could say comply or try to fall in line or adjust yourself to be with the form, and then watch how you will judge others if you don't feel like they're doing what you think they should be doing. Everyone's different. I mean, where's Dallas at, by the way? Is he sleeping?
Sick, maybe.
Yeah. So there's a good thing to observe. Dallas, I'm going to pick on him since he's not here to defend himself. A lot easier that way. Now he may be sick, so we're not going to jump on him too hard. But I don't see much of Dallas. Dallas is a temple resident. So is Dallas observing the forms or not? First thought, best thought. Think of it in your own mind.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, he is. Thank you. He might not be doing it the way you're doing it, but he's doing it. So, yes.
What is that spontaneous comparing of forms? That you always want to look at other people's forms in comparison to how you do it, and particularly in a way of judging or correcting.
Well, it's just a highly refined form of self-centeredness that validates itself because it has a little commentary running along. Well, there are forms, and we should follow the forms. And Sokuzan said, if you're a temple resident, you do this. If you're a temple resident, you don't do that. If you're a temple resident, you show up in the morning, and you should. But if someone doesn't do that, what is that? That is as much a practice for the person who is showing up as it is for the person who is not showing up, because that person has to actually, then they're working with their mind how they're justifying that. If something is just being observed, you won't justify anything. Good question. More?
Yeah, sometimes it's easy to lose sight of our own practice because something that someone else is doing can be so magnetizing, even in a negative way. Is there a way to return that awareness back to this?
I think just by asking that question, that you're probably quite often you're in a situation where you're already doing that to some extent. So it's always about awareness. I just say it over and over again. It's not about right and wrong or getting this or following the forms exactly or completely taking a hike and doing something else. It's always about awareness. So it's awareness of the way you observe the forms and the way someone else observes the forms, and seeing the contrast, but the judgment is extra. The contrast is is just there's a contrast. But there's a contrast between two people who are both doing their very best to follow the forms, to do them as a practice, to be here when the Hanan bell sounds, and to be here just before it's the first strike on the gong. Yes.
Is there a middle way in doing the forms?
I think there is.
What is that?
You have to find that. If we were to point out the middle way, the middle way, it would no longer be the middle way. The middle way is don't land anywhere. See the forms, be very, very clear. See the forms very, very vividly. Picking and choosing is extra. Yes.
Are the forms everything? Why do we have to?
Is that a forest on your leg?
Yes.
Is that new? I figured since the hair hadn't grown back yet. Are there any deer in there or elk?
No, there's a Japanese maple though.
Is it Japanese maple? Wow, that is a Japanese maple. Yes, go on with your question.
Is attachment to the forms or attachment to, is everything the form? Is that the realization?
Somewhat, but attachment to the form, you might have to, take 3, 10, 15 people. One person, their style might be to really attach to that form and really be, they might really stand out in that they were just kind of almost militant about it. I wouldn't interfere with that. Another person might be very, very loose about that, and they don't show up, they're somewhere else. Then I just ask the where they're at. And then the says, I don't know, they haven't checked in. And so I say, temple residents do this, 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 and this. And then we watch how temple residents don't do this, this, and this. They do something else. But they can only do that so long. And what I'm watching for, and I'll get to your question in a moment, what I'm watching for is if the person's, say, lack of staying fairly close to what that middle way is, if it starts to go too far out, that it starts to set a precedent so that it disturbs other people's practice, so that other people think, well, he's not here. Or they wouldn't say it in that tone. They might say, he's not here. What am I doing here? Now your question.
Are we always meditating?
We're always meditating on something. Usually we're meditating on something. We're upset, or we're worried, or somebody is mistreating us, or somebody is being really nice to us, or we're always contemplating, meditating on something. That's why after many, many years of meditating on lots of different things, according to what I was taught, I teach just sit down and watch. Don't particularly meditate on this, that, or the other thing, but if something arises, just watch that. If you don't meditate on it as a project, then it will go this way, it will go down, it'll fall back behind the stage set. Something else will come up, and then something else, and we just watch things come and go and come and go. And this actually exercises the awareness, so the awareness itself becomes strong instead of the things that are rising and falling. Yes.
Sokuzan from Traverse City wants to know, what does meditating mean?
I don't know. Did you look it up before you asked me that? Sokuzan? I don't know. Has anybody looked that up? It'd be kind of silly to teach meditation and not have even looked it up and to see what Wikipedia has to say about it. There's literally dozens and dozens of different kinds of things that come under the idea of meditation, working with some kind of an awareness of forms, awareness of no forms, awareness of forms, no forms, awareness of sound, awareness. So meditation means to be aware, but it could have an actual object of meditation. In ancient times, Tibetans would meditate on an image of the Buddha. Just meditate on that, or meditate on some kind of a deity. Like over here we have Lake Tara Rupa sitting over there, made of bronze. That's a meditation deity. You could meditate on that. You could meditate on the one you visualize. Then you could do various things with that in order to strengthen the awareness around that particular object of meditation. There's lots of ways that can show up. As you know, I teach traditional kind of meditation taught in Japan, shikantaza, or just precisely this. So whatever it is, it's just that, and it's very simply that. And that tends to come and go. Saw that. Yes.
Sokuzan says nope, she hasn't looked it up.
Nope. N-O-P-E?
That's what she says.
Nope.
And then Sheldon has a question.
Okay.
He asks, is the falling occurring whether we land or not? Is the landing really landing?
I think the way I'm talking about it, I mean, we could get into some kind of philosophical variations there, but the way I'm talking about it is to interrupt the natural openness of your being with some kind of an idea about something. The idea that we recommend that you work with is bodhicitta, or the mind of awakening, the mind that completely gives everything away to everyone, complete compassion. Yes.
Is falling bringing awareness to the attachments that we put on everything?
Yeah. If you're just falling, then you start to get to know yourself. This is what this is about, is to make friends with yourself. We all know, most of us, I think, I could say, we all know there's difficulty here somewhere in each of us that it's just easier just to not think about that. I get to think about it. But then something happens out here that kind of resonates or triggers that. Could be something very simple that no one was intending to offend you or hurt you or insult you, and yet something gets stirred up here and suddenly we're really, really mad and upset. The old mountain out of the molehill, the hidden triggers that I talked about yesterday or whenever it was, Sunday. Suddenly we're really upset. So if you're a meditator, if you're interested in training your awareness, and if this is something you have as a strong focus in your life, you're going to not try to get rid of that trigger, but use that so you can see how the mind works. So you can see when this happens, that occurs. So it's a very simple kind of project.
How does asking permission help Sangha?
You have to elaborate a little bit more. I'm not sure what you mean.
Being here, there's a form of asking permission, like letting people know what you're doing. How does that help on practice?
Just community, part of a community. Is that what just part of the community? Buddha is an example of someone who understood something. Dharma is what he understood, and the Sangha is a community of people that have looked at that, and something resonates there, and they want to know what that is and how to understand that. Simply put. David.
How does the Sangha not land?
I don't know. What do you think? Anyone?
What was the question? How does the Sangha not land?
I don't know. What are you looking at me for? So again, coming back to that, there's a very strong relative. Sangha is a very strong, definite idea about a group of people studying the Dharma, that everything is dependently arisen. There are no separate things anywhere. And not landing is a way of talking about and addressing the tendency of each individual, each member of the Sangha in a different way, will do some kind of landing or grasping or fixating or latching on to something. It could be something as simple as somebody did something to you and you blame them and you can't seem to shake that. The trying to shake that is part of the warfare, rather than what might be better to do is to just look at it. Just look at the way you don't like it. Jesse?
What are we doing when, what are we really doing when we're minding other people's business?
Meddling. If you've begun to look at your own business and your own, conflict or your own difficulty as understanding as possible, not condemning oneself, but trying to see deeply into where the conflict is, you're not going to have too much time to go and look at. You'll see someone else, and all you'll see is they're having difficulty. But if they come to you for help, then that's a different story. Then maybe you could set your own business aside for a minute and say, "So, how's it going? And try to help them, let them talk to you about it, but it's not so much about fixing that. It's about they're going to tell you about it, and you give them your attention. It means a lot. We all know how much it means to have somebody listen to us if something's going wrong, and we have someone listen who doesn't really give us too much advice, but just listens. More about that, Jesse?
I'm talking about the business that we pay attention to that isn't our business, when someone's not coming to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just kind of a gossipy commentary on everything, and it keeps us from being, you could say, responsible or aware of what we're doing, and we're able to kind of not distract ourselves. It's a form of active ignorance. We're actively looking at everything, just like watching Netflix is active ignorance. But if you know you're doing that, then it's called entertainment. If you don't know you're doing that, it's called entertainment. So it's not about stopping that. It's about being aware of it in such a way that you can see how it gets its fuel, how there's some kind of a payoff in doing that, some kind of a fluffing up of the self-centeredness. Well, at least I'm not doing that, or at least I'm being more this or more that. Kind of a way of evaluating oneself. I think that's how it seems to me. What do you think?
I can agree with that. I can go along with that.
All right.
I'll probably forget it in a few minutes.
Well, you've got what I got then. No, you don't. I got old age, you don't. Yes.
Jim Johnson from Muskegon.
Yes,
He's
James.
got 2 new people watching tonight with him.
Okay.
He asks, is there any way to know when to listen to what ego is telling us other than through choicelessness?
Yeah, always listen to everything, any voices, anything, always listen. And if you really are listening to what's happening here and what's happening there, give everything your attention. In particular, give your own thought patterns attention. But we don't give something, we're not giving something attention if we're trying to squash it or hold it down or ignore it, push it away, or justify it. As soon as something arises, just observe. Because if the minute you start commenting on it, you're actually wrapping it in a commentary, and then you settle for the commentary, and what the actual issue is inside the commentary. Sitting practice of meditation. Sit down, hold still, watch what moves, look at a wall, something that's in front of you, the carpeting or something, so there's not much entertainment going on, and just observe that. And if you hold very still, again, without being rigid, it might take a while, but eventually, you might daydream for a couple of days, couple of months, couple of years, but eventually you'll start to see the very mechanics of ego. You'll start, and it's not particularly comfortable. But if you're inspired to do this, if you really are, you're through going in, you're tired of going in circles, samsara, tired of getting better and getting worse, getting better, getting worse, getting better. Want me to do that a few more times? Getting better, getting worse, getting better. That's what it feels like. If you have any memory at all, yes.
Are the mechanics of ego any different than the daydreams, or is there a contrast?
I think the daydreams are whatever's happening there is a way of a discursive thought, a way of just tumbling around, and it's kind of, you could say, kind of wallowing in some kind of arbitrary creativity that keeps everything covered up, instead of actually looking at what's the fundamental situation that's happening, which is a consciousness that is creating all kinds of things. If you watch those without doing anything with them, then the awareness, this is just a way of looking at it, the awareness starts to back away from the phenomena, and so that it can see what it is. And then once that backing away has occurred and we get an understanding of what that is, then perception only. It collapses back into the phenomena. But at that point, you're no longer picking and choosing.
So the daydreams stop.
You won't care.
I guess I'm just curious about noticing how I still tend to daydream when I'm meditating. And is this still kind of not looking at the mechanics of ego?
No.
Could you,
Nope. Can't.
can't you?
Would that I could explain to you better.
What is I guess I'm just gonna ask the question.
Yes.
Again. What is the difference between the daydreams and the mechanics of ego?
It's, without trying to be cute, it's two names for the same thing. It might have a different kind of structure. They're daydreams. They're avoidance mechanisms that happen. We fill up our mind with all kinds of daydreams about who we are, where we're going, what other people are thinking, what they're thinking about what we're thinking, what I'm thinking about what they're thinking, I'm thinking. And these are mixed with all kinds of daydreams, night dreams.
Is it all of our discursive thought, because it is representation or to some degree fictitious, is it all daydreaming?
Pretty much. Everything is extra.
Is there anything there if the daydreams aren't showing up?
What?
Is there anything there in the absence of daydreaming?
No. Unless there is, in which case you started to daydream again. It's a completely open dimension, and it's discontinuous. So, and the causes and conditions that arise as any situation are coming from just everywhere. And the self-centeredness wants to seal itself off from that and be somebody who's successful, be somebody who doesn't fail. Or sometimes it goes the other way and just be somebody who's just a mess and just fails and can't get anything right, and no wonder I'm so terrible, there I go again. That's another form of self-centeredness that can happen. It's kind of the opposite of the other one. Don't have to do anything at all. But one thing that would have to happen is one would have to be here. It's called genuine presence. You're just here. And then whatever comes, it doesn't disturb the just here. So whatever comes, it may feel rough and raw, but it can't find anybody. It can't find a self. It can't find a being who is having that experience. The experience is just, as sometimes been said, just self-existing. It just has its own dynamic, and it doesn't happen to a person. Yes.
Drew in Florida has a question.
Yes, Drew.
He asks, in relationships, say with my wife, I often feel we each hold a hand of a multitude of cards we can play. If my wife lands a card, those times I have lacked a card I thought helpful to let land on the table, or lacked the motivation to play a card, it generally has created awkwardness between us. Is this something I should simply let fall or settle on simply awareness / attention to the cards being played?
Don't lay a card unless you have to. The space in which the card is either laid or not laid is more important than any cards that anybody plays. Anybody who's playing a card is actually locking down on something. Even this person sitting up here and presuming to teach the Dharma, I'm locking down on something. The Dharma. Everything is dependently arisen. Those are a set of concepts that are dependently arisen. So we have to do something, but less is probably better. So don't necessarily play a card, but watch everything that's moving all the time, including someone else playing cards. And don't try to stop them or correct them, or don't teach anybody anything unless you have to. Yes?
Is any sort of relative making a decision, is that a form of landing somewhere?
It is.
How do we practice not landing in the midst of relative responsibilities?
Like what?
Like everything that goes on here.
Like you got to make a decision? Like what decision did you have to make?
What to be productive with today?
That's kind of simple. That's like looking at this needs to be done, that needs to be done. Looks like there's always going to be some unevenness or evenness. I don't think it's particularly a lot of discursive thought goes into that. Does it?
Does for me.
Well, stop it. Does that help? You could make it more concrete. Actually, make a list of things. Maybe you already do this, of the things that you need to do, and then look at them. There's nothing wrong with analyzing. We're not saying you should just be some kind of a lost in space person because I said don't land. When I say that, I'm saying for you, your way of not landing may be just backing out a little bit of that. Landing on some kind of decision needs to be made. Something has to be done. So for you, it might be just noticing the way you keep kind of just flopping into that. And then as soon as you do, you regret it because you should have done this. Sound familiar? Yeah. So the other thing I would say, and this you've heard me say this before, but a willingness to fail, willingness to not be successful at something, so that we can understand, have a bigger picture of what this whole idea of success and failure is really about, and how much of it has to do with reinforcing a self that needs to be right, or needs to be thorough, or needs to be industrious, or needs to succeed in some kind of level. The great thing about the Sangha is being around people who are practicing, they're starting to tune into their own self-deception. So therefore, when you interact with them, you'll notice that people in this family, somewhat, but not as much as in other situations, don't really buy into your methodology or your way of running things. They might listen, might participate on some level, but don't add to the confusion necessarily. And we notice how much we enjoy being out in the more relative world where there's more materialism going on, and where we can kind of get out of our responsibility by talking to people who are in that same kind of swing. Well, you shouldn't do this. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? People here will not do that. A little bit, but not near as much as they do, because they're giving everything the benefit of the doubt, more so here than probably any place. People who are working with their minds, with the raw material of their minds, and are emphasizing the awareness or the space in which things occur, are actually aware of that. A lot of people in the world, really highly intelligent people, have no idea about the space in which things occur. They just think there's stuff in space. They don't realize that their thoughts are in a kind of space. You're beginning to see that, so it could get even more difficult to make a decision.
One of
Yes.
Sokuzan has a definition of meditation to offer. She looked it up.
Too late. No, go ahead.
She has several dictionaries cited here. I'll use the first one, Webster's New World College Dictionary.
Yes.
I'll pick the fourth one. The practice of quieting the mind by focusing one's attention on one's regular breathing, on a mantra, etc., for the purpose of deepening one's spiritual awareness, reducing stress.
Wrong. Spelled with an R, not a W. You've heard of Wrong Jung Dorje, haven't you? He wasn't exactly wrong. So, as I said, you could come up with all kinds of ideas, that some way of working with the mind, and that's as valid as anything. It's just that I've noticed over a period of time that probably a good idea to keep it very, very simple. If somebody wants something more complicated, we can do some white Tara practice, or we can do stand up and look at the wall. Yes.
Does that make everything wrong?
But
Everything.
does what make everything wrong? Me saying wrong? I was joking. Joke.
But if we are
Yes.
attaching thoughts and our perceptions on things, doesn't that make it wrong?
Like what wrong?
Everything. It's
I'm not following you.
okay.
It's okay?
Yeah.
It's okay to not follow them. I'm happy to respond to that if I can get more clarity on.
I'm not sure how to.
Okay. Well, if you come up with it, let me know. Yes, sir.
My question, I think maybe falls along that same line of.
A little louder, please.
My question maybe falls along that same line as far as duality goes, black
Okay.
and white.
Okay.
Is there such thing as a fact? Do facts exist?
Well, it's just a concept, so I would say it's a fact that there's light there, so that kind of fact. So somewhat. We're not trying to get rid of the physical or the world particularly. So there's facts.
But then with duality, is there a black?
Let me help you here. Listen to what I'm about to say to you.
Okay.
You're not going to be able to figure this out. Really, I'm being sincere. I'm not being silly. You can't figure out something because figuring out involves taking a bunch of ideas and concepts and so on. You can get close. Nagarjuna in the 1st century got pretty close. He said, not this, not that, not both, not neither. And he pretty much eliminated philosophy by saying emptiness. Everything is empty of what we think it is. So that should be the beginning of your awareness practice rather than the end of something. But you're not going to be able to particularly figure it out. I'm not saying you shouldn't try. Of course, you don't have to believe what I say. Go do whatever you think is correct. But you're here, so based on what I've been looking at for a long time, I would say strengthen your awareness. Sit down, hold still, watch what moves, and do it for years. Do it. Years and years. It takes a long time to do this. I don't think you can do it in even 5 years of 5 or 6 years of steady practice. It takes a lot to do this. Do it. Please do it. Do that. Yes.
Is there a fundamental fact?
I don't know. Maybe. You need to know that? Do you need to know that? Do you need to know if there's a fundamental fact?
I was curious of a really simple fact like the light being on if there's a contrast.
We get into the polarity of existence, non-existence. something is and then something isn't, and that whole area gets very fuzzy. That's why it's best to, as far as I can see, to address that with just seeing what it is rather than thinking about what it is. It's like the example I sometimes give. If you've all had the experience of sitting and talking to somebody who doesn't really talk to you, who you are, where you are. They're talking to who they think you are. They actually address. It's like another person. It's almost, sometimes you feel like you could walk away and they'd still be talking to the space in which you were standing in. It's so intense. Sometimes people will do that, and you can leave the room and they don't know you've left because they're so busy talking to their idea of you that you've kind of slipped out and you're out on the tree swing. So it's a very interesting area when that occurs. And it's not about stopping, it's about being aware. I've been doing that off and on with you for the last hour. I don't correct it. You can't make a fool out of somebody who's already a fool. You're already a fool. Yes.
This is an appeal from someone in Erin in California. She says, or he says, I know it is a real emergency if the prisoners in Kalamazoo County can't call out because there is a fake Chinese telephone system. I want to know what your organization can physically do to help prisoners in that area. I do not have the money or resources to help print out 37 Bodhisattva practices and put NSA phone numbers on them, all that I would like. Can you help deliver them?
Well, we won't refuse, but we can't comply with something that I'm just now hearing in a text or whatever. So, but you could send something to the monastery and address it to the Eno, and we'll take a look at it together and see if we can help them. We go into prisons all the time, different people here, and go into drug rehab and do what we can, but pretty hard. It's a huge, monstrous system. Michigan Department of Corrections and the county jails are also hell realms, highly stylized and secure and locked down hell realms. Very hard to go in there and do anything that fundamentally helps. That being said, send us, let us know what's happening. So we'll take a look at it. Don't turn anything down. I also don't guarantee anything, but of course, we aren't charging you anything either. Any further questions? Yes.
You're talking about how sometimes people are interacting with their projection of us. How can we endeavor to, when we are interacting with people, to not interact with our projection of them, but to meet them where they are?
So there are some meditation and action things that I've talked about before. Is one, don't forget gravity. It's not so much about them, a little bit, but it's about your own sense fields. Don't evacuate your 5 sense consciousnesses to suck up into the thought patterns of the mind about them. It looks like them, but it's actually your thoughts about them. So one of the things you can do is you can look at the space between, just visually, just the space between your two forms. Not to do anything with it, but just register that. Register that, their form, your form, their form. Listen to the voice. If they're talking, it goes up and down. Stay with the fundamental consciousness that's happening. The ego will say, you have to pay attention to what they're saying. No, you don't. You don't have to pay attention. You won't. If they're saying anything important, you won't miss it. But stay in your senses. Stay in the sense of smell, taste, touch, hearing, just the sound, just the seeing, just the color of the clothing, the color of their eyes, the shape of their head, without adding any evaluation to it. You have to be able to look at somebody and not know whether they're ugly or beautiful. They don't even have that kind of positionality. They're just there. You follow me a little bit? So difficult to do. We always want to know well, what do I really think about them? Or who are they? How can I, some kind of strategy around what we're perceiving. If you need the strategy, it will be there in full color. If you need the strategy, it will be there. It'll be all laid out exactly what you need to do. It's called choicelessness. It's your innate intelligence that's often shut down out of hope and fear that we tend to strategize things because we want to get our way. We want to be successful. We don't want to fail. We don't want to look like a fool. What if you stood there and listened to somebody and they'll say, so what do you think? And you could actually say, I want you to repeat that again. I didn't quite hear you. You can do that. And they'll say, sometimes they'll even say, well, I'm not sure exactly what I said. And then you can say, okay. And they'll say, well, what I meant was when I'm really having trouble with this or this, and this is not working, and this one mutual friend or something is doing this or that. And here again, it's the whole idea of give everything your attention. You don't have to do anything. You do not have to succeed at anything. Those of you who are therapists here in the room know that. You just have to be with people. You're not going to be able to figure out someone's karma. It's just such a labyrinth, but at least you can be here with the leading edge of the karma, which is their expression on their face, their gestures, and the sound of their voice. That's what you need to give your attention to. And if you do, and anything can possibly be done somewhere that you can actually do to help them, it will stand out because you're giving everything your attention. Interesting how when you're really, really generous, you get everything back you need. It's called mice. No, it's not called mice. It's called love. But it's not a feeling of being in love. It's just you're just with things. You're just with your world. You're in your world and you're part of your world. Why don't you have trees on your other leg?
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
You could put trees over here and make it winter.
I'm thinking about your face.
My face?
On my leg.
I'd like to keep my face right where it's at. That's like the guy said, I'm going to have a tattoo right on your face, right into my fist. You heard that joke? No? Okay. It's not a joke. Are we done? We're done. We're all done. 320 degrees.
So we'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our red chant books. And just remind everybody about our donation boxes in the hallway. We gladly accept all the financial support you can provide us. We also take donations online on PayPal. And you can see Junshu if you have a debit or credit card that would like to help us.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-o san shi shi fu shi son bu san mo ko san mo ko ho ja ho ro mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who's unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.